Christopher Columbus, a name the world knows today as a brave adventurer. But the truth is far more tangled, wrapped in fog, and astonishing. Columbus had not only deceived the Queen of Spain, but even his own sailors. He presented himself as the king of the sea, the reader of winds, and a master of maps. But the truth was that he was just an average sailor, someone who could use a few instruments, had done some minor work on a few voyages, and liked reading books. But he was no legend of the maritime world. Yet this very average sailor began a journey whose outcome was unknown even to his sailors, and perhaps not fully known to Columbus himself. Time passed. The sea was restless. The winds sometimes supported him, sometimes turned against him, and in the hearts of the sailors, rebellion slowly began to hiss like a snake, until one day they secretly decided that if this captain was going to get them all killed, they would kill him themselves. Why did the sailors grow such hatred for their own captain? How did Columbus escape the noose of certain death? And were these 3 ships even capable of reaching the New World? You are watching Unlocked History Hub, and in the second episode of this new series, we take you on a journey that became one of the most dangerous, uncertain, and mysterious sea expeditions in history. Spain's net of promises, what was truth and what was deception. Before the voyage began, the Spanish crown had made grand promises to Columbus. The first promise, Columbus would be included among the nobility and given the title of Caballero, a title that allowed an ordinary man to add Don before his name, meaning an ordinary sailor, would become part of Spain's most honored class. The second promise, Columbus would become the Grand Admiral, the same rank held by the highest admirals of Castile. The third promise, from all the lands discovered, 10% of the precious riches would belong solely to Columbus, and from every trading ship passing through those lands, 1/8 of the cargo would be reserved for his private trade. These promises sounded impressive, but the truth was that Spain was drowning in poverty. Resources were low, the treasury was empty, and the Queen had nothing to offer, except promises. That's why she gave Columbus only 2 ships. And even those were not provided from the royal treasury. They were seized forcefully from the people living in that region. The Queen had clearly said, "Since you have disobeyed the state, as punishment, you will hand over 2 of your ships to the crown for a year." And thus Columbus ended up with 2 weak, average quality ships. Food, very little. Weapons, almost none. Equipment, insufficient. Crew, only 89 men. Yet Columbus did not give up. He borrowed money and acquired a 3rd ship, the Santa Maria, which became his personal flagship. The beginning of the voyage. Prayers, knees, bells, and an unknown future. 3rd August. Church bells echoed in the air. Both the king and queen stood with their hands raised in prayer. Columbus adjusted his soldier-like hat, looked at the large white sails marked with red crosses, took a deep breath, and set off on the journey that would forever change the map of the world. The first stop was the Canary Islands. The winds here naturally pushed ships westward, the exact direction in which Columbus set out to find Japan. According to his calculations, Japan was only 4,500 kilometers away, but in reality, it was the greatest mathematical deception in the world. Alone in the ocean, no path, no hope, no land beyond the Canary Islands. The sea would not end, nor would the blue of the sky. The early days were easy. Winds friendly, waves gentle, sailors cheerful, and ships calm. Every morning Columbus would have breakfast in his cabin, look to the sky and pray, and encourage his crew daily. The direction is correct. The voyage is safe. Land is near. But the truth, land was far, and their courage was breaking day by day. This was the time when the sailors began doubting every word Columbus said, and then, doubt turned into rebellion. Here the story takes its truly thrilling turn, because now only one question remained aboard the 3 ships. Columbus woke up every morning before sunrise. He would stand on the deck, raise both his palms toward the sky in the middle of the vast ocean, and silently pray. But even this prayer had now become more of a show than a habit, because as soon as the prayer ended, He would walk among the sailors, speak to them with complete confidence, give orders, and then return to his cabin to take out the same instrument that always impressed everyone. This instrument was an old, half-circle-shaped astrolabe with a thin string hanging beneath it, and at the end of the string a small brass weight. Whenever Columbus held it against the sun or the stars, the weight would begin to sway. The others would see this and think he was some sort of magician, but in reality it was all guesswork. To put it plainly, Columbus had less knowledge and more acting. Yet this trick of his was enough to make them believe he was an expert, and he continued pushing the ships westward. In the beginning, everything seemed right. According to the books, land should have appeared within 10 to 15 days. The sailors were happy, and hope was alive, but when 20 days passed, cracks began to appear on the face of hope. No sign of land, no birds, no clouds, only the endless blue void and the merciless waves beneath. Fear took root in the hearts of the sailors. Then the whispers began. "This Italian will get us killed. He only wants to become a Don. Our corpses will be eaten by fish, while this madman keeps staring at stars." Hunger began to grow. Water started running low, and with each passing day the silence of the sea attacked them. They felt that if the ship wasn't turned back now, they would all die. 2 more days passed and fear completely overtook them, so much that even the thought of death started feeling lighter, as if they understood that the sea had already written their fate. They demanded to return, but Columbus flatly refused. This refusal was like pouring oil on burning wood. Now some sailors decided that if the captain would not agree, then keeping the captain alive was foolishness. The plan of murder spread across all 3 ships. There was another reason Columbus was not Spanish. He was Italian. All the other sailors were from Spain. They said, "If he dies, no one loses, neither us nor Spain. Throw him into the sea and say it was an accident. One death will save the rest." The rebellion against Columbus rose like a swelling wave. If he gave an order, the sailors would bark back or threaten him. Columbus would smile outside and pretend to be confident, but the moment he entered his cabin, he would shut the door and breathe deeply. He had begun to feel that his life was truly in danger. Sometimes he tried bribing them, sometimes promises, sometimes new stories. But now only 2 things remained on the faces of the sailors: anger and fear. Time had reached a point where minds began breaking from reality. Days grew longer, nights darker, and exhaustion seeped into their bones. Then illusions began. A sailor would point at the sky and scream, "There, that's land. I saw it." The ship would be turned in that direction, but there would be nothing, just sunlight, waves, and that endless blue water. But one day, when all the greenery of hope had completely died, a sailor suddenly broke the silence and shouted, "Birds! I heard birds!" The entire crew looked up at the sky, and then truly, from somewhere far, a small sound came, like life gently taking a breath. The sailors began shouting like madmen, and then one evening, black dots appeared in the sky, slowly forming into large flocks. These were the migrating birds that fly from North America to the West Indies for winter. Seeing the birds, the withered hope in the sailors' hearts suddenly bloomed again. It was as if someone had poured light into their souls. Columbus immediately changed the course of the ships and announced, "We are close to land." Very close, but 2 days passed. No land. The sound of birds, however, grew stronger, keeping both hope and anxiety alive. Then 3 more days passed. Sometimes birds appeared, sometimes they vanished, but land, nowhere. This was the last thread of the sailors' patience. Now they gathered around Columbus, encircled him, and in a thundering voice said, "Either turn the ships around now, or we will throw you into the sea." For 5 weeks, Columbus had controlled them with excuses and false promises. But now he had no promise left, no excuse, no knowledge. Only one thing remained, a final attempt to buy time. With a trembling yet firm voice, he said, "Give me just 3 more days. If in 3 days we do not find land, I will return with you myself. These were the 3 days that were either going to change the history of humanity or write the death of Columbus. Columbus, after giving the sailors a final 3-day deadline, had, as if calculated his own fate. For him now, asking to return was not just defeat, it was equal to death. This fear pushed him into a kind of madness. The speed of all 3 ships was increased unusually, such a speed that if in the darkness of night any hidden rock existed, the ship would crash straight into it and shatter. But Columbus no longer cared about danger. He saw only the west, only land, only one last hope of survival. The nights had become long. Cold winds blew, and the wooden planks of the ships creaked as if the sea itself was telling them, "Turn back. You don't belong here." On the night of the 11th of October, when a thin mist of clouds covered the sky, Columbus was pacing on the deck. He kept fixing his gaze on the distant horizon, his eyes so tired that sometimes it seemed something was visible, and sometimes nothing at all. Then, around 10 o'clock, he felt that far away, on the edge of the horizon, some sort of light was flickering. It wasn't a bulb, not a lamp, not any human-made light. In that era, such a light being visible from miles away was impossible. Yet he felt certain that something was there. Some shine, some spark, some sign. He immediately called his crew. "Look, there is a light." But everyone who stood beside him said the same thing. "We can't see anything, Captain. Maybe you're mistaken." Some laughed quietly in their hearts. Others called it an illusion. The light vanished, and the sea once again drowned in darkness. Today we know that the direction in which Columbus saw that flash. The nearest island was about 56 kilometers away. From that distance no lamp, no fire, no reflection could be seen, meaning that light did not exist at all. But for hours after that illusion, a young sailor sitting on the mast of the Pinta suddenly let out a scream. His voice tore through the deep silence of the night. "Terha-Lun!" In the moonlight, a sandy island slowly began rising above the water's surface. Clear, bright, and undeniably real. No illusion, no mirage. It was truly land. The captain of the Pinta wasted no moment and fired a small cannon. Its loud boom awakened the sleeping hope across the sea. The crews of the Nina and the Santa Maria immediately began shouting, eyes full of tears, voices trembling. After 36 days of constant fear, hunger, and rebellion, land stood before them in reality. The maps of the world were about to change forever. Columbus stepped forward and smiled at the Pinta's captain, Martin Alonso. "Senna Martin, you have seen land." The captain bent forward at once, as if the weight of years had lifted from his shoulders. "Sir, I hope my reward will not be lost." Columbus, in his characteristic arrogance, said, "I will give you 5,000 maravedis as a gift." But a twist in the story was still waiting. As soon as the ships reached closer to shore, the same sailors who just yesterday were thinking of killing him, today were circling around him. "Captain, we made a mistake. Please forgive us. You were the one who saved us. And when it comes to rewards, please remember us too." They were afraid that Columbus, in anger, might seize their wages and rewards. But what happened was even more shocking. The reward that the Spanish government had promised for the sailor who saw land first, Columbus kept it for himself. His justification was, "I saw the light before anyone else. Therefore, the first right is mine," even though that light turned out to be nothing but an illusion. No reality, no proof. But that one lie snatched away the chance of a poor sailor's life changing forever. Here we see a glimpse of the same Columbus, whose character later became one of the darkest in history. Despite this entire achievement, Columbus was still trapped in a misunderstanding. He believed he had reached Asia, perhaps near Japan, perhaps at the shores of China. He had no idea that he had stepped into a world that had remained cut off from the rest of humanity for thousands of years since the Ice Age. A land where humans had migrated from the Siberian hunting grounds, and which had lived for 25,000 years with its own civilizations. But the tragedy, the world that welcomed him, that showed him friendship and goodwill in the coming years, Those same people discovered that Columbus and his companions were not heroes, but executioners. Why? What had the Native Americans expected? And what catastrophe did Columbus unleash upon those innocent people in the greed for gold? To know this, wait for the next episode of the History of America, where we will see how humans first entered this new world, and how Columbus, upon arriving there, became the beginning of one of the darkest eras in history.